Stormborn by Kage. Chapter 25, Fourth Movement. Reunions. Rinforzando. Reinforced, emphasized, sometimes like a sudden crescendo, but often applied to a single note. Sensei, it's so green. Gara drags his eyes away from the entirely unharmed, thankfully, figure of his Uzushio to look down at the Genin standing with a hand wrapped around his elbow. True to character, Aki is the first to break the silence, though she keeps her voice soft in deference to Naruto, who is speaking with Haku again. Aki smiles up at him, restrained, but still beaming, and tightens her grip on his arm in barely contained excitement. Her violet eyes are glowing, and she keeps darting quick, sharp glances at Konoha around them, curious and odd. Something with him softens, and Gara allows himself a faint smile in return. It is, he agreed. Aki and Natsu came from Uzushio, from the mountains of Lightning Country, which are for the most part rocky and barren, and Uzushio itself tends more towards fields of grass and low scrub than Konoha's massive forests. For one born and raised in such conditions, Konoha is a sight, and Gara is well able to remember his own reaction to it after 12 years of life in Tsuna. There's not a lot of water, Natsu points out, wrinkling his nose where he's hanging onto Gara's weapons pouch. My techniques are going to suck. Aki sticks her tongue out at him. And that's different from normal. How? Aki! Her twin protests. Though he keeps his voice down. If I can't do big water jutsus, our strategies are ruined. That very nearly earns him a roll of Gara's eyes. If overcompensation is a genetically inheritable Uzumaki trait, and at this point Gara is hardly willing to believe otherwise. Natsu has it in spades, as his suit-down techniques clearly show. Gara suspects that as soon as the boy is in a position to have a nickname, someone will very quickly slap him with Tsunami, or something very close to it. Konoha has rivers, he counters, and nearly as much moisture in the air as Uzushio. I am sure you will adapt, Natsu. Makoto says nothing, but his fingers lightly grip Gara's sleeve, and Gara reaches out with his free hand to gently ruffle the boy's hair. He looks up and smiles, just a little, but Gara is relieved to see that he doesn't look nervous. For all his quietness, Makoto has nerves of steel. Aki and Natsu have done enough fretting for all four of them these past few days. Gara is honestly astonished that neither he nor their father has drowned them in the ocean. What? Naruto suddenly squawks, making Gara glance up curiously. The blonde is glaring at Fu with something like horror on his face. You left who in charge of the village? That. Fu beams back at him with that certain slant of her smile that reads, "You know you want to forgive me. Look how sweet and adorable I am." Well, she says, clasping her hands behind her back and rocking on her toes with a red grin. It wasn't like there was that much of a choice, Naruto. I mean, Gara and I had teams, so we couldn't exactly stay, right? Gara, meeting their gazes, one accusing and one entreating, crosses his arms over his chest and raises a brow. He wants no part in this argument. Naruto crosses his arms as well and shifts his stare to the tall, slender brunette, half hiding behind an unimpressed Karin. Right, he drawls, except I distinctly remember making Utakata my Jonin sub-commander. Going down the chain of command, he should have been left in charge. Fu snorts. Yeah, and that worked for all of 20 minutes. The first time Garin and Sugitsu had a little misunderstanding in the marketplace. With a groan of abject horror, Naruto slaps a hand over his eyes and drags it downwards as though to wipe the mental image away, even as Karin bristles and hisses, "Shut up, moron! It was entirely the Navy's fault. I had no part in anyway." Fu barrels on with blind determination. The Western market kind of got a little flooded. Naruto mouths, "A little flooded," with something like despair in his eyes. And as soon as Utakata got the report, he ordered cleanup crews to be sent out, then had what was either a temporary mental breakdown or a really impressive tantrum. I most certainly did not. Declared that he would be accompanying us as a second bodyguard for the Uzukage, and then promptly abdicated and went to pack. Utakata tucks his hands into the sleeves of his yukata and very carefully doesn't meet Naruto's eyes. "I would have been terrible at the job," he defends. "I have never wanted to be a Kage, Naruto-sama, even temporarily. I'm afraid I don't have the constitution for it." eyes narrowed. Naruto looks half a second away from calling baloney when Fu adds cheerfully, since he wasn't willing to do it, and since as soon as Roshi got wind of everything, he was overcome by a dire need to meditate and skipped out to go sit on a hill, we took a look at the emergency protocols and noticed that in a crisis, the head of the hospital has the same authority as the sub-commander. Kabuto! Naruto demands, voice almost squeaking in horror. You were going to leave Kabuto in charge of my village! Relax, Naruto. Fu waves a dismissive hand. Kabuto must have heard what was going on because by the time we got to the hospital to talk to him, he'd locked it down and set up a 3-block perimeter and declared that anyone who tried to get through who wasn't mortally wounded would be used for testing his newest batch of poisons. Naruto rubs a hand over his forehead, looking a little pale. Of course he did. He mutters, Gara honestly feels no sympathy. Uzushio is a madhouse on a good day, even with half of the weirdest shinobi gone. It is, after all, the source of Naruto's genetics. That alone should say more than enough. Fu takes people off her fingers. So me, Gara, Utakata, Roshi, Kabuto. Oh, right, Frosty refused to stay behind when you were, and I quote, being a reckless, irresponsible buffoon with the self-preservation instincts of a suicidal sparrow in a room full of cats. And Korean insisted on coming so that we didn't accidentally cause an international incident, so that left us with just one choice, really. And Kimaru just so happened to be in the village to visit Juga, and since you and Orochimaru cured him, he's practically been an honorary citizen of Uzushio anyway, so it all worked out. Kimaru, in charge of Uzushio. I am going to have you all doing T-ranks for the next year! Naruto growls, dangling his fingers in his hair as though attempting to pull it out. All of you! If Gara actually thought Naruto was going to go through with it, he might protest, but he knows Naruto won't. It was actually a fairly neat solution, and Gara had long enough before their departure to brief the other man on what would probably go wrong, the hospital declaring itself a hostile territory aside. Kimimaro is fiercely loyal, after all, to Naruto, just as much to Orochimaru now, given that his partner has been living happily in Uzushio for the last 5 years. He has a vested interest in keeping the village intact. From his position at Naruto's right shoulder, the Uchiha snorts softly. I would like to formally rescind my sarcasm. He says dryly, your life is very hard. Naruto sweeps them all with a glare that is nowhere near as intimidating as he likely thinks it is. Your sympathy is appreciated, he growls, and then addresses the rest of them. You know, in other villages, people fight over who gets to be Kage. They're willing to kill to get the position, even temporarily. They, Utakata says with feeling, don't live in a city full of Uzumaki. Gara handled it, Naruto mutters a bit petulantly. Gara lets his eyebrows go back up as several people exchange glances. Aiki stifles a giggle that he studiously pays no attention to. With a bright laugh, Fu steps back to nudge him gently with a shoulder, and when he looks down at her with deeply buried amusement, she reaches up on her tiptoes and ruffles his hair. He bears it with as much dignity as he's able, despite the way his Gideon are slightly laughing at him. Yeah, she says cheerfully. And that would totally be a valid argument, except that over the years you've managed to infect Gara so he's nearly as insane as you are. He just hides it better. Case in point? He sees absolutely nothing wrong with Kabuto attempting to secede the hospital from the rest of the village just to get out of being in charge for a month. Admittedly, Gara does think of it as a rather neat solution in the face of an unwanted promotion, but he keeps his mouth shut. There's no need to give anyone here more ammunition. I am very amused by how you're excluding yourself from this madness, Naruto informs her, but he's grinning too, warm and bright and happy. Gara looks at the way the Uchiha is standing shoulder to shoulder with him and speculates how much that has to do with it. It's not everything, certainly, given that Naruto so casually revealing his identity means Danzo has been dealt with, but it's likely a good portion of it. Gara wonders, if only to himself, and because Fu might have a point about Naruto's manner being infectious, if he can apply fairy tale logic here, and whether, since Naruto is obviously the dashing hero, that makes Uchiha the damsel. He conceals a smirk at the image. The snap of heeled sandals on stone makes them turn to see the Hokage approaching, eyes narrowed in a look that promises retribution, despite the polite smile fixed on her face. It is a truly eerie expression, and Gara doesn't blame his Genin when they crowd a bit closer, regardless of his sudden lack of personal space. Oh, Rashi! she says like it's a threat. Naruto gives her his best grin, even as he rubs sheepishly at the back of his head. I go by either, he says carefully. Uzushio wanted me to remember who I was when I was, reincarnated, so... Gara has heard Naruto explain his reincarnation many times over the years, and it's never cohesive or rational. Then again, it's Naruto doing the explaining, and the whole matter is entirely sensible from his point of view, so Gara supposes he shouldn't expect anything different. He snorts softly and adds, I believe that given the ties the Uzukage has to the chakra that is contained within Uzushio, the village has gained a form of sentience, and with the destruction caused by Kiri, she was able to influence Arashi's soul as he died. Naruto huffs and rolls his eyes. Isn't that what I just said? He demands a little crossly. Badly, Dobe. Uchiha mutters, and receives a dark look in return that makes him smirk. Tsunade stares at Naruto for a long moment, eyes hard, and the younger blonde stiffens warily, taking a step back. Then, with a low growl and a muttered curse, Tsunade leans forward, grabs Naruto by the ear, and reels him into a tight hug. Naruto, you idiot! She whispers, rough and choked. Naruto's eyes soften, and he smiles, wrapping his arms around her in return and squeezing gently. Hey, Bachan, he murmurs in return, and Gara turns away a little to give them at least a bit of privacy. A pair of wide teal eyes lock with his, and he feels rather like someone just shoved him hard. It is not that he wasn't expecting Tamari's presence, or that of Kankuro, who is standing at her shoulder. He's known for years now that she bullied the council into giving her the position of Kazekage after her return to Suna, in large part so that she could have free reign to search for him. It's simply unexpected that she would look like that, stunned and overwhelmed, as she brings one hand up to cover her mouth, relief and dismay warring in her expression. She takes a step forward, Kankuro right behind her, and then hesitates. Sensei! Aki whispers, pulling on his arm, and he looks down automatically at the redhead just about level with his elbow. She looks back at him, wide-eyed and eager, and asks, Is that your sister? She's pretty, Makoto adds unexpectedly, amber eyes fixed on the Kazekage. And she looks like you. Gara isn't quite sure how to respond to that, so he simply nods and looks up again to see that Tamari is still standing there, watching him nervously. Not because she thinks he's going to snap and kill someone, because there's no terror in her eyes, but uncertainty, as if she doesn't know how he's going to respond to her presence. Small hands push him a step forward, and Gara glances back down at his ganin, arching a silent brow. Natsu grins back at him and says, Don't you want to see her, Sensei? She's your sister! Sisters are awesome! Aki agrees with a matching grin and joins her twin in urging him another step forward. Especially older sisters! By 7 minutes! Natsu protests, though he doesn't stop pushing even when Aki sticks her tongue out at him again. 7.5. Makoto murmurs, half a second before Aki can. He moves to the side, leaving Gara's path forward open, and though he doesn't join his teammates in attempting to shove Gara closer, he clearly isn't going to stop them. Gara looks down at the three faces turned up at him, and that softness is back. Warm and gentle at the core of his being. They are good children. And he is incredibly, unspeakably grateful that he's had even this much of a hand in the creation of their current selves. Wordlessly, he reaches out to run a hand over Aki's long crimson hair, nearly the color of his own, and then ruffles Natsu's shorter locks. He rests a hand on Makoto's head, and then pulls free of their grasp, stepping forward. Tamari is still watching him, eyes even wider than before as she glances between him and the rest of Team 1. The hesitation on her face registers with a faint pang for Gara. Not of hurt, but relief. He remembers barely a week ago contemplating how his life would have gone had he returned to Suna, how it would have taken years to earn what Naruto offered so quickly, how he likely never would have known the trials and joys of trying to turn 3 children into true shinobi. Looking back, despite all the hard work, all the hardship of rebuilding a village from nothing, and then trying to repopulate it with a people more used to being rootless nomads than a cohesive village, Gara doesn't believe he would choose any differently if given the chance. Naruto is caught up in his own reunion, But Haku is watching, and he unobtrusively takes up position right behind Gara's team, smiling faintly. Gara nods his thanks, then turns towards his siblings and steps forward, one pace, and then another, until he's halfway across the space between them. It's only then that Temari moves, quickly striding forward with Gunkuro right behind her until there are only a few feet of air separating them. "Temari," Gara says, looking down at her, and it's truly a surprise to be taller. "Congratulations on becoming Kage." He doesn't offer a hug, or even a handshake, because despite how she and Kankuro relaxed around him after Suna's failed evasion, they were never that close. Temari stares at him for a long moment, and though her eyes are wet, her face is dry. She takes a short breath and then reaches up to brush his hair away from the tattoo over his left eye. "Did you find it?" she asks softly. Gara reaches up, tangling her hand with hers to press their fingers against the kanji for love. "I did," he answers with a faint smile, and doesn't have to look back over his shoulder at the family he chose. Naruto and Haku, Utakata and Garin, Fu and her Genin, Aki, Natsu and Makoto, Uzumaki Gin and Team 2, Ookami Koto and Team 4. They're his people in bond and deed. Kankuro and Temari will always be his blood, but they aren't his only family anymore. "I am happy. Uzushio makes me happy." Temari smiles back at him, warm and sweet, and then wraps her arms around his neck and pulls him down into a tight and entirely unexpected hug. Gara blinks, but after a moment he lets his arms come up to encircle her lightly in return. A strong hand closes over his shoulder, and he glances up from his sister's bowed head to see Kankuro smiling too, broad and relieved. As soon as Temari steps back, he takes her place, wrapping Gara up in a bear hug that nearly lifts him off his feet. That truly startles Gara, because Kankuro always shied away from him more than most, even more than Temari with her forced calm and stiff attempts at kindness. But Gara has no urge to reach for his sand when people touch him. Naruto cured him of that through more than just adjusting Shukaku's seal. Touch and closeness are no longer things Gara shies away from. He doesn't expect pain to come of such simple things as warmth and kindness anymore. Instead, he hugs Kankuro back and thinks that even if he has chosen his own family, surely his original one could be a part of that too. Utakata watches Gara's reunion with his siblings with a faint smile, arms folded over his chest. There are eyes on him, sharp and intense, but he knows their source and ignores them easily enough. He is done with Kiri and has no wish to involve himself in their politics, even in a roundabout manner. Haku is watching him as well, one eyebrow slightly raised, though his expression is perfectly polite, and Utakata ignores him as well. He is aware that it won't last long, this attempt at avoidance, but even the mention of Kiri stirs up a whirlwind of feelings within him, hardly tempered by what time has passed. Betrayal is still at the forefront. An ache and an open gaping wound that has barely managed to scab over. Uzushio has helped, has healed him more than Utakata had ever thought would be possible before Naruto and Gara had found him near Mount Katsuragi. But it is not a blanket cure-all, and can't erase the past so easily. They seem interested, Haku ventures after a moment, his tone thoughtful. Utakata just flicks him a look. He hums non-committally, wondering what he'll have to do to get the Hyoton user to drop the subject. He isn't entirely certain what the other Kiri native is pushing for. If Haku thinks Utakata is going to return to Water Country at the first hint of welcome from the new Mizukage, he's gravely mistaken. Utakata left for a reason just as valid as Haku's, and that will never change. Look sharp, Ookami Koto murmurs, sounding vaguely amused, the way she always does. She's standing with her team, casual and languid, looking far too lovely and poised to be the elite jonin that she is. There are not many Ookami left, as most of them fell during the invasion, but Koto is the uncontested matriarch, despite only being in her late 20s. Given that Kabuto is one of her clan, and never argued with her appointment, Utakata has always felt he's fully justified in his wariness of her. When he turns his attention to her, halfway poised to step away from a trick of some sort, Koto just dips her head in the direction of the Kiri contingent, and Utakata has to swallow a grimace. Lovely! Just what he's always wanted, a reunion of his own. When he turns back, the Mizukage is only a few feet from him, looking entirely unamused. Ao is at her heels, which is a faint surprise. Utakata had thought him loyal to the station of Mizukage rather than the person under the hat, and to be permitted a position so close to the Mizukage, it's likely he was part of the rebellion. What isn't a surprise is that Ao looks just as displeased as Terumi-Mei to see him standing with the others from Uzushio. Mizukage-sama? Utakata says politely, because he knows his duty to his village and not insulting one of their neighbors, no matter how much he wants to ignore them, and no matter how easily he believes Uzushio, with its 5 Jinchuriki and reincarnated storm god, could level them in a fight, is likely a good start. Utakata? Mei returns, sharp-eyed and perfectly civil. You've been giving my hunter nin a number of headaches, I'll have you know, but you're looking well. The spitting image of your father. Utakata doesn't bristle, but it's a near thing. His father was the Saindame Mizukage, and chose to have Seiken sealed within him for much the same reason Gara's father turned his son into a Jinchuriki. It's hardly a safe subject with which to open a conversation. He says, keeping his tone even, with effort. I see I failed to inform you of my whereabouts. An oversight, but I have been rather preoccupied of late. Uzushio must be my first priority, given my position. After all, I cannot let my village down. Mei snorts, and the tension eases from her features as she rocks back on her heels and crosses her arms over her chest. One corner of her mouth is quirked up in something very close to a smile. Well, she says, eyes flickering over Gara, Fu, and Naruto. At least I know you're in good company. The best, Utakata agrees after a beat, and Mei smirks at him, then turns and sweeps back to her second, who looks nervous and a little jumpy. A kind word from her has him flushing and coming to attention, then hurrying to follow to step as she heads deeper into the village. Utakata watches her go, not entirely certain what just happened. From where he's still standing firm, Ao snorts, clearly amused at the expression on Utakata's face. When Utakata glances back at him in question, he just shakes his head. She's right, is all he says, studying the younger man with a brusque once-over. You look better. The last time Ao saw him was just after Harusame betrayed him, stumbling away from his master's body and disappearing into the mists. Utakata would like to believe he is worlds away from that raw, wounded man who was entirely ready to wage a war against the rest of humanity. Harusame and Ao had been friends once, Utakata knows. He can recall dragging them both home from the bar more than once, aggravated and embarrassed, and now Ao was the one to teach him tracking. Takiri? To Terumi-Mei, Utakata owes nothing but bitter loathing. But Ao? Perhaps there is a tie there, tentative as it may be. I am, he agrees, fingering the stem of the pipe concealed in his sleeve. Uzushio is a place that is good for finding peace, both within and without. Ao nods, looking a bit awkward, and then jerks his head at Haku and Fu. They came to warn us off. You weren't invited? Utakata remembers the way Haku fumed at the witlessness of their Gary watchers, annoyed by the fact that no opposition was offered to take his mind off Naruto, and smiles. He hadn't known it was Ao who was leading the mission. Despite appearances, he says with amusement, watching how Haku is pointedly ignoring their conversation despite being only a few meters away. That was a diplomatic approach. It was assumed that my presence might cause unnecessary conflict. Diplomatic, Ao repeats doubtfully and shakes his head again with a grunt. He looks back at Utakata, expression turning contemplative, and then says quietly, I don't know if anyone ever told you, but Harusame only wanted the best for you. Living with that thing, Seiken answers the insult with a flare of angry chakra, and Utakata takes a step back, laying a hand over his chest and reaching for his connection with the Biju. Peace. He is only ignorant. He's rude, Seiken retorts, but settles himself regardless. Utakata snorts softly and waves off Naruto and Fu, who have both turned to him with concern, before returning his attention to Ao. He attempted to kill me, he says coolly. That makes it rather hard to take your words to heart. Believe me, life with Seiken is much preferable to a gruesome death during his extraction. If Harusame thought otherwise, he was a fool. Ao sighs with clear exasperation, tugging at one of his earrings in frustration. Maybe. An optimistic fool, I'll give you that. He thought to remove Saiken and let you live a normal life, but something went wrong. Utakata turns his face away, wondering at the sharp ache within him. Was it always as simple as that? Not betrayal, but a misguided attempt to help? That would be very like his old master. Saiken? He asks silently. The Biju offers up a confusing jumble of regret and vindication and sympathy and remorse, all tied together with a few scattered images of the doomed ritual. Utakata is nowhere near as skilled with seals as Fu and Naruto, but he's learned enough to recognize what several of the arrays mean, and it would fit. He isn't entirely sure he wants it to. Well, think about it, Ao mutters a touch gruffly, stepping back with an awkward half-wave. You know where to find me if you'd like to talk. Utakata nods, unable to find the appropriate words, and watches the man leave at a double-time march, clearly eager to get away from the unmanly sentiment clouding the air. It is certainly not how Utakata expected his encounter with the Kiri contingent to go, but that's most likely for the better. He turns away, looks back at his Uzukage so bright and warm to find Naruto watching him carefully, and smiles at the boy who gave him a home. Naruto beams back, relieved and happy for him, and Utakata finally allows himself to think on Ao's words, though he refuses to dwell on them too long. Whatever happened back then, he's in a better place now, and despite his regrets, he has no desire to change his life. Not when it's led him here, to this. That is, of course, the exact moment that foreign chakra surges, rising all the way to the overcast sky in an eruption of violent light, noise, fire, and a scattering rumble as a large stretch of Kana's northern wall explodes!